It's been a few days since Palia's 0.173 patch introduced a new companion, a new huntable creature, sitting in chairs, and flow tree groves, and I've taken some time to allow myself to digest this patch in its fullest in order to give you my most sincere look at it. And I'll be upfront, this patch brought with it some positives, some negatives, and quite a few problems. But before we jump into it, I did want to give a big thank you to Amelia Mars, who was the head of community for Palia up until Wednesday, November 22nd. I wish you the best moving forward, and I would like to thank you for the time that you spent trying to wrangle this community together for the past few years. Now, on to the classic me. And where should we start? Oh, I know. Controller support. No, it's not really in the game, despite the Switch release being slated for the holiday season, which we are now officially in. No, they just made a couple of changes for controller support. And in the name of making controller support changes, they rearranged the UI for pulling your tool out, made a choice to re-pull out your last used tool, and added a giant X to the screen that has the same functionality as the X button on your keyboard does. All of this could have been fine, but that pull out last used tool button doesn't actually do that. Instead, it activates whatever the last selected tool slot in the R menu is, which is confusing since you can switch those items around within the slots by clicking and dragging them, and you can also choose tools based on keybinds, which never interacts with those slots in the first place. Overall, this was a fairly pointless change that could have been handled much better with an adaptive UI that's based off of the input type that you are actively using. And while on the subject of controllers, if you're using one, you now have access to Palia's cheat menu, which is almost entirely deactivated. You can see it, most of the buttons don't work, blah, blah, blah. Well, except for one. One of the buttons does work. And it shows that it is entirely possible to toggle your character's body type at will within the game right now. Although I don't know what ramifications this could have, it could lead to some serious bugs, so I recommend not trying this out for yourself, but just know that it is there if you're playing a controller and you might accidentally run into it. Don't worry about it. And on to bugs that are potentially caused by switching your body types. Here are the outfits added to this patch, and you might notice that my character has a changed body type, and they're also tiny on the screen. Again, bug, possibly with the storefront, possibly with the changing. No, they also added these preview buttons to the side that don't update with the color of the outfit that you picked, but that's a good change. Mostly. So first we have the River Guardian set, which comes in several shapes and sizes. I won't subject you to micro me wearing them for too long because it's a little bit fuzzy. The outfit costs 1 full Stardew Valley and looks okay, I guess. Next up is the Street Skater, which also costs an entire Stardew Valley, but makes me wonder where you're going to be skating in Palia in the first place. And finally, the Royal Strategist is a decent outfit idea with a skirt. Again, proving the major flaw with Palia's entire outfit system to this point. My newly masculine microman wants to wear pants. And, well, that's just not an option with this new outfit. But really, can't you just give alternative options for parts that are obviously skewed towards one side of the feminine masculine scale? I mean, all you're doing with these outfits is alienating people based off of them not wanting to spend 1 1/3 Stardew Valleys for a hat and a shirt if they're never going to wear a skirt on their character. Oh, and they also added a new item to the store. These are gliders. They cost $5 or 425 coins, which is 1/3 of a Stardew Valley. And these have no alternative looks and are really just reskinned gliders. They're the start for alternative accessories in the game, but really there's not that much to see here yet. Maybe check back later. Moving on from outfits, very quickly, some of the star stones got nerfed in terms of gold values. Rubies are worth 50% less, amethyst 33% less, and sapphires 25% less. Probably an okay change, but another in the long line of nerfs. The workbench now starts at whatever you built last, provided that you stay within the zone that you're currently in, and, don't leave to go to town, which is overall a good addition. Sitting on chairs and couches is now possible, although in the case of my larger couch, I could only sit in the middle of it, so rip relaxing with other players, I guess. Some new wallpapers have been added to the game that correspond to each villager's star path. They'll give you them at your house instead of mailing them to you like a normal person might, and this is in no way retroactive, so you'll just have to go out and gift. Oh no, what are they doing here? Okay, so some of the villagers are in fact very retroactive with this system. They'll visit you after the first time you gift them a liked item from like that weekly once system, and the wallpapers are meant to be a fairly basic color, nothing fancy, although a pretty good thing to add to the game. Although I did notice that some of the 2D icons don't always match the wall colors that they actually provide. And I guess that brings us to the main talking points for this patch. No more small stuff, right? First, let's talk about flow groves. Why? Because I feel like it. These are a new world interaction that happens once every in-game day at midnight. Basically, an area on the map gains flow energy, causing the trees in that general area to become flow trees. Once they're cut down, nobody else on the server can get them or find them, and there's no indication that they've been cut down for the day at all. And I'm betting you can spot the problem with this already. First, let's go with the good thing about this system. If you're like me and hate farming trees with a passion, you can show up in Bahari Bay a few minutes before the new day, and someone will usually shout out their location to everyone, so everyone will go there and just sort of get them. You won't necessarily get a ton of extra flow planks, but if you just want to get them once in a while, it is enough that you probably won't have to worry too much. And that's the positives. Now, on to the negatives of this system. It still only takes 2 people max to cut down flow trees, with most of them still being soloable. And really, there's nothing to stop a small group from clearing out an entire grove without telling anyone. And unlike normal flow trees, or even Palium ore, there's no quick respawn here, meaning that they just added in a way for players to take resources away from other players again, but this time in a completely unintentional manner. It was another design that took a whole 2 minutes to discover competition problems with it. So another chop a chase, if you will. That said, most people currently seem to be doing a good job of shouting these out so far, so it's not overly a major concern, but I did just give some of you ideas. No, the biggest problem that I have with this system has to do with the subsequent addition of their new huntable animal, which I'll talk about now. The Muin is a new wolf-like species who, unlike the Sernuk and Choppa in the game, look like they will tear you limb from limb for wandering into their territory. An unfortunate design decision for a creature that can't and won't physically harm you in any way. But the worst part of these guys? They run and jump into trees when they hide. This means that in order to hunt them quickly, you'll want to chop down those trees willy-nilly. So an update which harms tree density is put in at the same time as one that relies on it. Oh, and these guys sort of don't really do anything new besides the hiding in tree part. They run pretty slow, and high level ones teleport, just like the Cernuks, and they are still beaten easily by copper arrows, so no reason to use fine arrows yet. Now, if you've enjoyed the complaints I have so far, you'll absolutely love the last thing that we're covering. And if you remember back to the beginning, you'll notice I haven't talked about the new quest line or the new villager yet. So let's do that. There's a new limited time quest line being added to the game that provides personality, context, and nods at different characters' backstories. And it will be removed in the future because future players don't deserve that content. Is it too soon to mention that the Switch still doesn't have the game and that there's no definitive answer on whether or not the game will come to PlayStation or Xbox in the future? Because that seems pretty important to this. But moving on from that whole thing, if you're able to beat the 3 pretty early game quests that serve as a prerequisite for this, you'll unlock the new quest chain, which the first one is to make furniture for the new visitor, followed by one that has you make food for them. I will be straight up with you. These quests are in no way meant to be direct follow-ups to the early story. And I can safely say they aren't because they rely on characters who are barely past the tutorial of the game to have an abundance of endgame materials and tools just available to them. And that's just for the first one. I get it. Players that have been here from the beginning might have quite a bit of stuff stockpiled. But did they forget about the new players that they just brought in shortly after releasing the game to the Epic Store? And this still isn't my biggest complaint about these new additions. No, in order to explain that, I'm just gonna jump us back to a question that Singularity 6 answered back in June of 2022. Will it be possible to play Palia in a non-violent way, or do you have to hunt or fish to progress? Given the general nature of the game, it should come with little surprise that Singularity 6 is going to attempt to accommodate as many playstyles and lifestyles as they possibly can. I only have one concern with this, which is that if they do decide to attempt to make alternatives to everything that hunting or fishing can provide, does that not just make those skills useless game mechanics? Or perhaps they'll lead to different styles of customizations or food types, and my worries are mostly unfounded. So to sum up all of that, you won't need to hunt or fish to progress in the game. And I can say that at the time of this question, there was a broader scope to the narrative around this question, with the game being vegan friendly, so animal and fish byproducts would not be necessary either. That brings us to quest number 2 in our chain. This quest requires us to make 3 new recipes, and one of them is, as you might guess, entirely locked behind hunting the new Muin creature, while another's locked behind oysters, which I would consider as living creatures. But I mean, hey, I get it. They were able to sneak Neo's friendship quest by everyone without fixing it at all, and that one required hunting the whole time too. So they thought that they would just gate an entire new story and character behind the same hunting requirement, and nobody would notice. And for those wondering, no, you can't just request the new meat without obtaining it first, because that's not how the request system works. You need to get an item to request it, and getting someone else to help you cook doesn't actually solve the problem with the animal product portion of this anyway. Oh, and also the new food needs to be star quality, so you better be really good at cooking or have a ton of star ingredients around. Personally, the oysters took me 5 different tries to get, most of which used my star ingredients up, so that was a big waste of time. Now, if you do those quests, you'll get a letter inviting you to meet the new character, and then they become a part of your game. Now, I'll be honest, overall, I think the update was decent in terms of gameplay additions, although poorly thought out in terms of not giving players easy ways to troll one another, and, not keeping in line with yet more of Singularity 6's past promises. But hey, if they're good at one thing, it's not keeping promises. And that's it. That's the patch. Here are the people that make these videos possible. Thank you. And here's a video that YouTube thinks you'll like from the channel. Have a good day, and hopefully Thanksgiving went well if you were in the US.